Welcome everybody. This is Google API integrations using native FileMaker tools. I'm Madison Gutierrez. I'm going to get started while people are still funneling in. As you've seen the screen that's been up, ensure you can access your Google account if you want to follow along with the provided demo file, the workshop file. If not, create one real quickly. Also, if you don't have the session files, you can check them out. Here's the link. They're also available through the DevCon2Go app, along with at har.fm/Google API. So a little bit about me. I'm Madison Gutierrez. I'm from Texas. I'm actually from here in the Metroplex, over west, Fort Worth. I graduated high school early and then moved off to the Texas Panhandle, where I graduated college and then went further into Texas Panhandle, a real tiny town. That ultimately took me to Tulsa, where I was introduced to FileMaker, more so out of just curiosity, just to solve a problem I had. Not long after that, I moved back to the Metroplex to build a solution for my father's real estate business, which ultimately brought me to Harmonic, where I was brought on as a full-time consultant. Since then, I've been both FileMaker 16 and 17 certified. A couple other things about me. I'm married. I'm a father of four to be. My fourth child is due in 1 month. So, yeah. And another thing about me, so for those who aren't from Texas, there's stereotypes about Texans. You know, we all talk with a drawl, and we ride horses, or we may have cattle, but I will prove you right a little bit. I own some registered Texas Longhorns on the family farm, and the one in the black has actually tried knocking me over multiple times. So he'll be a nice steak one day. I go by FileMaker Madison in the FileMaker community. I've not been using FileMaker a whole long time. Again, I started in May of 2015. I got brought on with Harmonic as a consultant, 2016. Another cool thing is my name is unique, and I'm the only Madison Gutierrez on Facebook. It's kind of cool. Here's a couple screenshots of some of my work. I primarily like SDK and mobile stuff. So there's the oil app on the left, my father's real estate app on the right. And then with Harmonic, the mobile app right here is one of our clients where it was our first published app on the App Store, so we were real excited about that. The top one is the course maker. Stop by our booth if you haven't already, check it out. And then the last one is the MTEA Super Mileage Challenge. That's a real cool story. So why are we here today? Google API, what are we gonna be doing? This is going to be somewhat fast-paced. We're going to try and get through this as fast as possible for those who are wanting to follow along with the workshop file. We're going to authorize your Google account or the Gmail account you just created. We're going to use the authorization keys and IDs to request a token, which will then use that token to communicate with the API we enable. So let's take a quick view. So right here, I'm going to send myself an email. Hey Madison, be sure to mention the post-DevCon follow-up session where we will dive deeper into the Google API. Let's send this to myself at 5:33 p.m. Send. All right, sent. There we go. Come over here to FileMaker. Now we're in FileMaker. Run message demo, yes. There we go. Hey Madison, be sure to mention the post-DevCon follow-up session where we'll dive deeper in the Google API, sent at 5:33 p.m. We did this all with FileMaker, all native code, native functions. And it's easy, and I'll show you how. So, what just happened technically, and how do we do that? So I set up my Google account for API access. I was provided a secret key and a client ID. I then use those in FileMaker to request an authorization code. This diagram provided from Google says request token. At a high level, that's what we're trying to do. We're requesting a token that we can use continually. But for the diagram, I think it's confusing, so I'm going to put an X there, and we're going to call this requesting an authorization code. So we request our authorization code. Google then has to give consent to us, or they have to request our consent to allow them to provide access to that account. So they give us a consent screen, we'll log into the consent screen, and then from there, as long as that batch is in the background, they'll authorize this application and they'll provide us with an authorization code. Now this authorization code can only be used once to exchange for a token. So we will then take that authorization code, we'll exchange it for both an access token and a refresh token. And we'll do that with an insert from URL request with some curl options. Google server will provide that back to us. We'll parse these out with some JSON. And then lastly, we will use these tokens to query the API we enabled. Again, we'll get JSON responses back. Now, as I mentioned, the refresh, what happened right here, you wouldn't have to do steps 1 and 2 as long as you still have the refresh token. So, all right, let's head over to the Google Playground. So in the Google Playground, I'm going to show you the exact same process, but how we derived to it. And I've provided links all throughout the demo file where you can simply just click them and see where they take you. And a lot of the areas I've also provided some information. So let's head over to the Google Playground. Close that one. So right here, what Google's wanting us to do is select and authorize an API. For today's sake, we're going to be using Gmail. So let's just scroll down here to Gmail. I literally have to say my alphabet out loud sometimes. CFG, there we go. Okay, so what we see right here is different types of scopes that we can use, and this is different areas of access to Gmail. And if you chose a different API, they would have different scopes as well that provide different types of access. But we're going to use mail.google.com. This will allow us to read, send, delete, and manage your email. So we'll simply just select it and then authorize. Now what Google is doing right now is they're showing us a consent screen, and they're basically saying, if I hadn't already logged in, they would say, hey, what account do you want to use? I would input my account name. And right here they're saying Google Auth Playground wants to access my Google account. Which account? This one. And they want to read, send, delete, and manage my email. Again, this is the consent screen. So me as Madison, I'm providing Google access to my account. Now they do this process very quickly, and it's going to jump down. But I'm going to go back to step 1. No, step 2. Yeah. So here we see they provide us an authorization code. And we can see that right here. And in a little bit in FileMaker, we'll see that this is provided to us also in just some HTML. And with a simple native FileMaker function, we can just pull that out. So again, we've requested an authorization code from Google. They've provided us the authorization code after we've consented it. Now we need to exchange this authorization code for a token. So let's exchange it. We can see we were provided our, oh, see that's where it jumps down. They got me again. Here's our access token and our refresh token. And you can see the timer counting down right here. We have 1 hour, 3,600 seconds before our access token is revoked. But thankfully, we won't have to go through that whole consent screen again. We can just simply use this refresh token, query Google server, and they will refresh this. And if we scroll down, we can see the JSON response that we actually received. Here's our access token. It's right there. There's our length, and then the refresh token. And what refreshing it looks like, you'll see that this JSON will change. The refresh part will go away. So I just refreshed it. You can see I've got another hour again, so I better move fast. You can refresh as many times as you want as long as you have that access token, as long as you have the refresh token. You use that refresh token, you refresh. And this is what you would push server side if you wanted to authorize an account, push it server side, and then just let it refresh. And then that way you can build automations around it. So let's go down here to step 3. So at this point, again, step 1, we authorized our account. We got our authorization code. Step 2, we exchanged our authorization code for tokens, both an access token and a refresh token. And at this point, we don't have to do steps 1 and 2 anymore unless we're just refreshing. Now we're going to be communicating with the API we've enabled. And in step 1, we chose Gmail. And it gave us the scope mail.google.com. And we wanted to be able to read, send, delete, and add. So we're going to come down here and list possible operations. And then again, this is just a playground for you to get familiar with the API that you're choosing to integrate with. But let's go down here and let's do looking for get users messages. There it is. List messages in the user's mailbox. Now I've read through the Gmail API docs, and in order to get a single message out, you have to know what message you want to get, and Google has internal IDs, so we're going to query to see what message we want, and then we're going to get that ID, and then we're going to use that ID to query that specific message. So you can see, here's our URI, and in user ID, I'm just going to put my email. And this will not work if you type it wrong. So we're good so far. So let's send that request. You can see I've got a lot of emails, but we're just going to grab this first one. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to copy that ID so I can use it in my next request. So again, I've requested from Google, hey, tell me all the emails in my inbox, in my account. And I'm going to grab that first one. I'm going to come back here to list possible operations. And I'm now going to get the specified message. And you can see, same URI, but what it did is it appended a slash in the spot for an ID at the end. So again, I'm going to type in my email right here. Come down here to the end. Paste that. So that, again, this is the message ID, the specific message ID I want. I'm going to send that request. Looky here. Scroll down. This is a JSON response. Hey, Madison, be sure to mention the post-DevCon follow-up session, where we'll dive deeper into the Google API, sent at 5:33 p.m. Same message. So how do we reconstruct this in FileMaker so we can actually do something with it? Let's go back. So what have we seen? So far we've seen the demo where I sent an email to myself in the mail client and FileMaker. I pulled it out, showed it just in the dialog box. Secondly, we walked through the picture diagram where I stepped through each process, and then now we just went through the Google Playground example. So what native FileMaker tools? I briefed on these earlier, but we're going to use a web viewer, and we're going to set it with a named, we're going to set that object and name it. After we've done our consent screen with Google, they're going to, inside the web viewer, provide the authorization code that we'll have to pull out of it, and we'll use a get layout object attribute, and we'll get the contents of that. And then from that point forward, we're going to use insert from URL, where we'll have different curl options. We'll be using both post and get with -d or -h. And lastly, the responses we get from Google will be in JSON, and that's where we can use just native FileMaker JSON functions. So initiation time, I'm calling this a secret handshake. So we all know if you want in a club, you have to be initiated. You have to be hazed. So I'm going to haze you, because I've been hazed going through this. So let's set up the secret handshake. If you're following along, now's the time to open up your file. What we're going to be doing first is we're going to set up your account for API access. We're going to get your client ID and secret key. We're going to enable the desired API, which will be, in this case, Gmail. And I've already set the web viewer. I've got it pre-populated for you. And lastly, we will use, OAuth 2.0. All right. So let's go to the demo file. Enter. So I've got all this in here, but I'm just going to delete mine and go through this real time with you guys. Okay. So I've provided all these links. So I'm just going to start right here, Google Console. I'm going to go to the Google Console. And I'm already logged in, but if this was your first time to log in, it's going to ask you a couple things. It's going to give you this dialog box. One, it's going to say, hey, do you want us to send you thousands of emails to market all of our services? And if you're like me, you will say no. And lastly, do you consent to our terms and service? So you have to say yes to that. Once in, up here to the left of the search bar, we've got to create a project. So we're going to select this right here. Now, if this is your first time creating a project in here, you won't have any of these. You can see I've got one, but for the sake of today, we're just going to create a new one. We're going to name this project. I'm going to call this FileMaker. FileMaker DevCon presentation. Perfect. Create. Now this takes about 20 seconds. And again, it's creating a project for this Google account. And inside of this project is where we'll create a API key. And all API access through that key is going to go towards this project. So if you have multiple applications where you need API access through an account, you can set it up separately. So if you do need to revoke one access, you can simply turn it off and it doesn't affect all your other applications. All right, done. So this quit spinning, so we can simply select the project right here, or to the left of the search bar, we can select right here, and I'm going to select FileMaker DevCon presentation. All right, it just takes me to the dashboard. To the left of Google Platform, top left, the menu icon. We're going to click this, come down to APIs and services, and go over to credentials. Let's click that. So in here, again, we're going to create our client ID and secret key, but first, we've got to set up our OAuth consent screen. And what this is earlier when we were in the Google Playground, it said Google OAuth Playground 2.0 wants access to your account. So here's where, if this is a specific project of yours, you would name this part specific to the project so that the person that's logging in knows what project this is associated with. So let's name this DevCon presentation. I'm going to call this consent. And Google won't let you do stuff like Google API because that's not technically your project, that's their project. So let's save that. Okay, and again, that was in the OAuth consent screen, and we can see that it's still right there. And it just bumped us back over to the credentials. So we'll click Create Credentials, and we'll create an OAuth client ID. We'll select Other, and this is the key name. So let's just name this FileMaker Key. Create. Now, real quick, I want to note that this is not the same as authorizing a FileMaker account through FileMaker accounts using Google OAuth. That is something entirely different. These are not the same. Oh, sorry about that. So we're going to hang here for a second, and I'm going to do a split screen so I don't make you guys sick. But I'm going to put that right here and come to this. So we're now going to copy and paste our client ID and our secret key into our file. So let's copy that. Let's paste it here. And I formatted the field because it gives it to you in white, so it'll remove that. Let's copy that. There we go. One day I was banging my head against the wall because I could not figure out why it wouldn't work, and I got these things swapped. So don't swap those. All right, for your action user ID, user email address has to be exact. Looks right. Credential name. Now API, the name, this is not used, but I just put it here for my personal preference, just so I know which one I'm working with. Because the idea with this file is that you could use this as a test file, practice with multiple APIs, and if you have multiple projects, you would use multiple API keys. So I'm just going to call this FileMaker Key. Okay. So next, I'm going to scoot this over just a little bit. I'm going to go to the API dashboard so we can enable the API we want to work with. which will be Gmail. So one thing to make note of is if you enable Gmail, let's say, for instance, if you enable Gmail for one project and yet you create a whole new project, you're going to have to enable it for that project as well. So you can scroll down and look for it, or you can just search for it, find it, and enable. All right, so I think I'm done with split screen. I'm going to show you a few more things in Google real fast, though. Sorry, bad habit. I do workspaces like that. My coworkers don't like it either. Let's see. So let's come over here to FileMaker. We've got the client ID and the secret key. We've got them in here. So next, what we're going to do is I'm just going to show you a little bit of information, kind of what we're going to do with the next steps. Let me make sure with my slides we're not too far ahead. So, all right, so we've set up our Google account for API access. We enabled Gmail API. Now we're going to query Google Server to authorize our account, and we'll get our consent screen. So let's go back, and let's show you a little bit of the construct for that. So right here, OAuth 2.0, I'm going to click that, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of this. So I'm down here in OAuth 2.0, mobile and desktop apps, and all this is referenced so you can kind of follow behind and read some of this. There's a lot of information in here, and Google doesn't really put it in a neat and orderly fashion that we preferred. It's there, you just got to dig for it, and yeah. But we're on step 2. We're just going to scroll down here. So it'll start you out right here, but we're on programmatic extraction. And for a simple solution where you're just wanting to play around with this, this is the one we use. There's many different ways to do this, but this is the one for today's sake. So I've got that right there. And I also want to mention, again, the scope that we saw when we were in the playground. If we scroll up, we can see right here, OAuth 2.0 API scopes. We can take a look at that. I'm going to do a search for Gmail again. Show me. There we go. And these scopes probably look very similar to what we saw in the Google Playground when I selected Gmail, and it gave me that drop-down list. So there's our scope that we're using. So let's head over to our file. And that's where our scope goes right here. Pre-populated all these others. So now we're just going to authorize account. Here's the URL that we're going to be setting inside of the web viewer. You can see our scope right here at the top line. Cool. Now, if this is your first time to do this, it's going to ask you to type in your email address, and you will see the consent screen name that you typed. I chose DevCon Presentation Consent Screen, just to make it very clear. But I'm going to allow that. And then right here, I'm going to hang for a second just so I can show you. In the Google Playground, it skipped over this part real fast, but we're going to dive into it just so you can see kind of what's happening behind the scenes inside this web viewer. Let's go to our data viewer. I'm going to get the get layout object attribute. So I named the layout, the web viewer, I named it authenticate account, and I'm just getting the content of it. So you can see we've got a bunch of HTML. And in the web viewer, we just saw this message. That's all we saw right at the top. But they have all this other information above, and we can see our code right here, right there. Starts with a / for me and ends with LE. So I'm going to exit out of that. And then by clicking done, we're just going to use that function, pull it out of the web viewer, and just set it into a data field. So right there, / ends with LE. So we've authorized our account. This code is good only once to exchange for tokens. If you lose the token, again, you will have to redo this process. But as long as you don't lose that token and maintain your refresh token, you can keep doing that over and over. So I'm going to go to my slides and just touch base where we're at. So we did our consent screen. We logged in. We gave Google consent for our application. Google did their checking on the background, made sure the person logging in was the person that had access to that API key. They provided us our authorization code. So we're still part of, this is still the secret handshake. And yes, this is more hazing. So let's go back. All right, next, let's move to our next tab, access token. So let's show you the script workspace. So we set our web viewer. You saw the dialog box with the URL that we set it to. We did our authorization, and you saw the function in our web viewer tool, where we pulled that out with get layout object attribute. Now we're going to request our token. So here's our first insert from URL, where we're going to use some curl options. So let's take a look at that. So our URL, we're just looking at a field. And then our curl options, we're using our dash data as mentioned. And then we are reconstructing what Google supplied us with. I'll show you this real quick also. I'm going to close that. Don't save that. So exchange auth code right here. So we're just reconstructing this right here. That's where that link took me. Close that. Let's go back. And then here's one more thing I want to note. This is just the curl syntax. Here's just a reference point. And if we come down here, right here, so this is something that's kicked us in the rear. Last year at DEF CON, actually, we were working on this in the foyer. But the long double dash form of D, dash data, which we're using in here, requires a space between it and its values that follow it. So just make sure you remember the space and just brush up on your curl options if you're running into issues, of course. So we're going to do our insert from URL, and with this, we're doing a grant type of an authorization code. We're taking our authorization code that we were provided, and we're exchanging it for the tokens, both the access token and the refresh token. So let's run that. We got a JSON response right here. Just like we saw in the Google Playground, we have access token right here, we have our time limit, and then we have our refresh token. So that was the response we got from Google. We're going to parse that out and just place it in some fields just for referencing. And again, now we're ready to query the API that we've already enabled. And again, if this access token runs out, we simply just refresh it. And I'll take a quick look at that refresh. Refresh access and parse it out, all in one step now. So again, we're going to reference a field, and then for our curl options, we're using the dash data again, and then we're just rebuilding what Google has supplied us with, which I reference right here. So there's a link to that. And so we can just watch it refresh. So it just refreshed the code for me. And a thing to note is on the refresh, just like we saw in the playground, we don't have a refresh token inside of the API refresh JSON. The refresh token only comes in the initial authorization code. And when we do use the refresh token, we change the grant type to refresh. So, all right, let's go back. Okay, so we had our authorization code. We parsed it out of the web viewer. We took it, we used insert from URL. We queried Google's server for our tokens, access and refresh. We received them, and now we're going to, we parsed them out. We parsed them out. So we've parsed them out, and now we're at the point of identifying API necessities. So where we're at is this is the step 3 process in the Google Playground. So what we'll do is we're going to use these tokens, and we're actually going to call the Gmail API, get a JSON response. So let's go back, and we'll go to our last tab. So we see here again, we've got the mail.google scope, and these are the same URIs that we used in the Google Playground. This one was just to get a list of all the messages, and this one was again to take and look for just one message based on the ID. I'm going to show you these in script steps before we push the button. So let's do a script workspace. So get message IDs. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here. We're going to do an insert from URL. This is now to the API itself. And I put these in here in just plain text just so that we can see them. But here's what we're going to call. And then just like in the Google Playground, this we saw as the, I believe it was, we saw it as this. That's how we saw it. But we're just re-referencing that. So we reconstruct it this way, and we're going to request that Google grants us all the messages in our inbox. We're going to come down here, and we're going to do just a simple JSON get element. We're going to have all those IDs listed. We're going to get our message, zero-based keys, and get our first ID. We're going to pass that in a parameter into our next script, which is then get the single message. So we will receive that parameter. We'll come down and do an additional insert from URL. And again, we specify the URL right here. And this looks the same right here. Again, user ID, message, but we append to the end that message ID that we're wanting. So let's close out those. So let's push it. And there we go. I've got it both here in the dialog. Hey, Madison, be sure to mention the post-DevCon follow-up session. We'll dive deeper into the Google API, sent at 5:33 p.m. And then we've got it down here in a global field where we can reference it also. So how many people followed along? Did anyone, who got a response? Awesome, yes, awesome. Okay, good. So, what have we done? One, you're in the club. I'm done hazing you, okay? That's the secret handshake. You've identified an API necessities, which were the URIs of the get message IDs, and get a single message. And what do we do now? You take that JSON response, you're going to parse it, you're going to use it into your files. If you choose a different API, you're going to use those JSON responses, you're going to get the data you need, put it into your database. And of course, expand your horizon. Google has so many APIs. Like I said, we've all come to know and love. If we could integrate these into our solution, it would be amazing. So this handshake, you've got it. It's with the community now. Let's see what we can do with it. And some tips I have, again, test your APIs with the Google Playground. That's going to allow you to kind of get that systematic process down. And what you're going to see is that it's the same process over and over, and then you just change your API necessities, the URIs or the URLs you're going to be using. Obviously, try and transpose what's in the Google Playground into your FileMaker solution. Insert from URLs made it dramatically simple along with the curl options. So let's do one more demo. Let's go back here. Demo 2. Okay. All right, so what I'm doing right here is I'm showing you two layouts. I've got 0 records in either one. I'm going to close both of these. And some of you might like this. Should we push it? All right, let's push it. Let's see what happens. All right, all done. Oh, that was fast. Okay, that's not what, it's better. No. All right, so let's go back to my email. Okay, let's come down here to the drafts. I've got another one. So I'm constructing an email. Hey, Madison, check this out. Oh, and be sure to mention the post-DevCon follow-up session. We'll dive deeper into the Google API. Let's put our time. I'm going to put 6:05. And now I'm actually going to pull this up. I'm going to get all of these attachments. I'm going to paste them here. So we've got a video. We've got all the Harmonic employee phone numbers, an expense report, Let's see. Oh, yeah, reimbursed for my 17 certification. That's nice. Me at a vineyard, which was awesome. And a list of all the states and a workflow diagram. Awesome. So let's send this. Sending, all right, sent. Let's come up here. Demo 2. All right, we've got them all right there. Let's come back to the demo. Okay, I'm going to delete that. Command D. All right. So, oh, that's what it was. All right, I'm going to close that first. So show the layouts. Okay, nothing in either one. It's done with that. Second. I just wanted to show you the button again. All right, so what it's doing right now is it's pulling that email in and it's ripping through all of the attachments. It's not only just pulling the attachments in, it's having to query each individual attachment by an ID itself with a separate Google Gmail API request. And we've got it all right here in FileMaker now. And real quick, let's take a look at that JSON. Let's go over here to BB Edit. So we've just ripped through all of this, all FileMaker native, parsed it into fields that we can do stuff with. And then, I mean, all of them right here.
Cool, 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 cool. Very cool, very cool.
All right. So thank all of you for coming. Thank the Harmonic team. If you haven't checked out our booth, we're a production studio is what we like to think of ourselves as. So we like to tell stories, not only just build software. So come tell us your story if you haven't already. This session, I noticed a few spelling errors. I will correct those. I will be updating those. If you have any questions, of course, reach out. Please fill out your session evaluations. It does a great job for us other speakers as we present new stuff next year. And do you have any questions? And if you do, please use the mics. Thank you.